They say money talks, but in Marcus Sterling's case, it was about to scream. He sat in that cold mahogany courtroom, looking at his wife James like she was nothing more than a stain on his expensive Italian suit. He thought he was discarding a burden. He thought he was trading up for a younger, flashier model. He signed the divorce papers with a smirk, mocking her silence for weakness. But Marcus didn't know who James really was. He didn't know who her father was. And when the judge opened the sealed envelope of Arthur Vance's last will and testament, the smile didn't just fall from Marcus's face, it was ripped away. Stick around, because the revenge you're about to witness isn't just sweet. It's absolutely priceless. The air in the conference room of Blackwood and Associates smelled of stale coffee and impending doom. It was a sterile room on the 40th floor of a downtown Seattle skyscraper overlooking the grey drizzle of the city. But inside, Marcus Sterling felt like the sun was shining exclusively on him. He adjusted his cufflinks platinum, a gift from his mistress, though his wife James didn't need to know that just yet, and slid the heavy document across the polished table. Finally, Marcus breathed out, a cruel chuckle vibrating in his chest. I thought this day would never come. James sat opposite him. She was wearing a grey cardigan that had seen better days and no makeup. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe practical bun. To the outside world, and especially to Marcus, she looked plain, boring. The kind of woman you married when you were a struggling junior associate and needed someone to cook your meals and iron your shirts, but the kind you outgrew when you made partner. Just sign here. James, Marcus said, tapping the paper aggressively with his Mont Blanc pen. And here. And initial the bottom. James picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. You're sure about this, Marcus? Her voice was quiet, raspy, as if she hadn't used it in days. Am I sure? Marcus laughed, looking over at his lawyer, a shark-faced man named Gregson. Gregson, she asks if I'm sure. James, look at me. Look at my life. I'm closing million-dollar deals. I'm driving a Porsche. And you're still clipping coupons for oat milk. We aren't in the same orbit anymore. Honestly, I'm doing you a favor. With the alimony I'm generously agreeing to, you can finally buy some decent clothes. He leaned in his voice, dropping to a toxic whisper. I need a woman who fits the part, James. Jessica fits the part. James flinched. It was the first time he had said her name out loud in this context. Jessica Vane, the 24-year-old marketing intern at his firm. The one he'd been seen with at Le Caviste 3 nights a week for the past 6 months. Jessica, James repeated. She looked down at the divorce decree. It was a no-fault divorce, but the fault lines were everywhere. She's vibrant, James. She has ambition. You've been stagnant. You're holding me back. Marcus checked his Rolex. Come on, Chop Chop. I have a reservation at 7 Osro. Celebration dinner. James looked up her eyes, uncharacteristically dark. You are celebrating ending our 10-year marriage. I'm celebrating freedom. Marcus corrected his cruelty, casual, almost habitual. And don't look at me like a victim. You get the apartment in the suburbs. It's paid off. You'll be fine. Just find a nice librarian job or something. James gripped the pen. For a second, Marcus thought she might throw it at him. Instead, she lowered the tip to the paper. Scritch. Scratch, she signed. James Sterling. She pushed the papers back. Done, she said. Marcus snatched them up, blowing on the ink as if drying a masterpiece. Gregson, file these immediately. I want the decree absolute by the end of the month. He stood up, buttoning his jacket, towering over her. Goodbye, James. Keep the key to the apartment. I won't be needing it. I've already moved my things to the penthouse. James stood up slowly. She gathered her worn leather purse. The penthouse. That's expensive, Marcus, even for you. I can afford it, he sneered. Unlike some people, I know how to make money grow. Make sure you keep track of it, James said, a strange cold note in her voice that Marcus hadn't heard before. Money has a way of disappearing when you don't respect where it comes from. Is that a threat? Marcus scoffed. Please, go home, James. Watch a soap opera. Leave the business to the adults. He stormed out of the room, high on victory, already texting Jessica. Done. I'm yours. Champagne is on ice. James remained in the conference room. Gregson the lawyer looked at her with a pitying grimace. Mrs. Sterling. Ms. Vance, I suppose now. Do you need a cab? James looked out the window at the rain. The plain housewife demeanor seemed to evaporate, replaced by a rigid military posture. No, Mr. Gregson, she said clearly. My driver is downstairs. Gregson blinked. Driver. Yes, she said, turning to leave. And tell Marcus I'll see him in court on Friday. The judge insisted on a final asset review. It's just a formality. Gregson waved a hand. Oh, it will be formal, James said, opening the door. Very formal indeed. Friday arrived with a torrential downpour. The King County Superior Court was a bustle of wet umbrellas and miserable faces. Marcus strode in, shaking off his umbrella, looking irritated. Jessica was on his arm, dressed in a red dress that was perhaps a bit too bright for a courtroom chewing gum, aggressively. Why are we here, Mark? Jessica whined, checking her reflection in her phone screen. You signed the papers. You're divorced. Let's go to Cabo. It's a formality, babe, Marcus assured her, patting her hand. The judge just has to stamp the asset division. James probably wants to whine about keeping the blender. Let her have her moment. They entered courtroom 4B. James was already seated at the plaintiff's table. She was alone. No lawyer. And she looked different. Gone was the grey cardigan. James was wearing a black tailored suit that fit her with razor-sharp precision. It wasn't off the rack. It was bespoke. Her hair was down, cascading in waves, and she wore a pair of pearl earrings that caught the courtroom lights. Whoa, Jessica whispered. Is that her? She cleaned up, Marcus muttered, frowning. Probably spent her first alimony check already. Pathetic. All rise, the bailiff boomed. Judge Reginald Thorne entered. He was an older man, known for his no-nonsense attitude and a terrifying intellect. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked over the file. He didn't look bored. He looked intrigued. Case number 99262. Sterling versus Sterling, Judge Thorne announced. We are here to finalize the dissolution of marriage and confirm the equitable distribution of assets. Marcus's lawyer Gregson stood up. Your Honor, the parties have agreed to a settlement. Mr. Sterling keeps the business assets, his vehicle, and the primary savings. Ms. Sterling retains the suburban residence and receives spousal support for 3 years. We ask you to sign off. Judge Thorne peered over his glasses. I see that. However, a new document was filed with the court yesterday morning. A document that significantly alters the financial landscape of this marriage. Marcus rolled his eyes. What did she find? A savings bond from her grandmother, he whispered loudly to Jessica, causing a few people to chuckle. Mr. Sterling, the judge snapped. You will be silent. The judge picked up a thick envelope with a red wax seal broken now. This is the last will and testament of Mr. Arthur Vance, who passed away 3 weeks ago in Zurich. Marcus frowned. Vance? That's James's maiden name. Her dad was a mechanic or something. Who cares? Mr. Vance, the judge continued, his voice echoing in the silent room, was not, as you implied in your affidavit, a mechanic. Mr. Arthur Vance was the majority shareholder of Vance Global Shipping and the silent owner of the Aurora Tech Consortium. The room went dead silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a split second. Marcus froze. Vance Global Shipping. That was a Fortune 500 company, one of the biggest logistics firms on the planet. "I don't understand," Marcus stammered, standing up. "James's father lived in a trailer park. We visited him once. He lived where he chose to live." James spoke up. Her voice was cool, composed, and commanded the room. She didn't turn to look at Marcus. She addressed the judge. "My father believed that character is built in the absence of luxury. He wanted to ensure that the man I married loved me for me, not for the portfolio." Judge Thorne nodded. "Indeed. And according to this will upon his death, the entirety of his estate, valued at approximately $4.2 billion, passes to his only daughter, James Vance." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. His knees buckled, and he fell back into his chair. $4.2 billion, he had just divorced $4.2 billion or so. However, the judge continued, a small, icy smile playing on his lips. "There is a specific clause regarding the timing of the inheritance. Clause 14A. Should my daughter be married at the time of my death, 50% of the estate shall be managed by her spouse to ensure the longevity of the family union." Marcus's head snapped up. Hope, wild, desperate hope, flared in his chest. He was still married. The papers weren't final until the judge stamped them today. "Wait!" Marcus shouted, jumping up. "Your Honor, we are technically still married. The decree isn't stamped. If her father died 3 weeks ago, I am entitled to manage half that estate. I retract the divorce. I withdraw the petition." Jessica yanked on his arm. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "Shut up, Jessica," he hissed, shoving her hand away. He looked at the judge, panting. "I love my wife. We can work this out. This divorce was a mistake, a moment of passion. I want to honor her father's wishes." James finally turned her head. She looked at Marcus with a gaze so withering it could have peeled paint. Judge Thorne raised a hand. "I haven't finished reading the clause, Mr. Sterling." The judge looked back down at the paper. "Should my daughter be married at the time of my death, 50% of the estate shall be managed by her spouse, unless that spouse has filed for divorce, committed adultery, or acted with malice toward my daughter, in which case the spouse receives nothing. Furthermore, the estate will fund a forensic audit of the spouse's finances to ensure no misappropriation of funds occurred during the marriage." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "You filed for divorce, Mr. Sterling," the judge said dryly. "And you are currently sitting in my courtroom with a woman who is not your wife, whom you have publicly paraded around town." Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "But that is not the worst of it for you," the judge said, turning a page. James stood up. She picked up a manila folder from her table. "Thank you, Your Honor. While my husband was busy mocking me for clipping coupons, I was acting as the CFO for my father's shadow holding company. I handle the books, Marcus." She tossed the folder toward Marcus. It slid across the defense table, hitting his hand. "I know about the Cayman accounts, Marcus. I know about the money you've been siphoning from your firm's client escrow accounts to pay for Jessica's apartment and your new Porsche." Marcus looked at the folder. He didn't need to open it. He knew what was inside. That's absurd," he croaked. "It's embezzlement," Judge Thorne corrected. "And since Mrs. Sterling or Ms. Vance has provided this evidence to the district attorney this morning, I believe there are officers waiting outside those doors." The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit stepped in. Jessica shrieked, grabbing her purse. I didn't know anything. I'm just an intern. She scrambled away from Marcus as if he were radioactive. Marcus looked from the police to the judge and finally to James, the plain, boring wife he had mocked. James, please, he whispered, his arrogance dissolved into pure terror. Baby, please, we can fix this. James smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You signed the papers, Marcus. You wanted freedom. You're about to be free of all your assets. Enjoy the audit. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'm ready to sign the final decree now. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a distinct mechanical click. In movies it sounds dramatic. In the silent, horrified atmosphere of courtroom 4B, it sounded like a bone snapping. Marcus Sterling, the man who had walked into the courthouse, checking his Rolex and dreaming of Cabo, was now having his arms wrenched behind his back by Officer Miller. The cold steel bit into his wrists, pinching the skin. You're making a mistake, Marcus shouted, his voice cracking an octave higher than he intended. Do you know who I am? I'm a partner at Blackwood and Associates. I play golf with the district attorney, Detective Halloway. The man in the cheap suit stepped into Marcus's personal space. He smelled of stale tobacco and rain. Not anymore, Mr. Sterling. We just got off the phone with the senior partners at Blackwood. They're fully cooperating with the investigation into the escrow accounts. Seems they didn't know you were using their client funds as your personal piggy bank. They're pressing charges too. Gregson, Marcus whipped his head toward his lawyer. Do something. This is unlawful arrest. Gregson, the shark-faced lawyer who had been so smug minutes ago, was busy packing his briefcase with frantic speed. He wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. I'm a divorce attorney, Marcus. I don't do criminal defense, especially not for embezzlement. Gregson snapped his briefcase shut. And considering your assets are frozen, I don't see a retainer coming my way. You're on your own. Gregson scurried out of the courtroom like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Jessica! Marcus turned to his mistress, desperation clawing at his throat. Call my brother. Tell him to post bail. Jessica Vane was standing near the exit, her phone raised. But she wasn't calling anyone. She was recording. She was live streaming on Instagram. I can't believe this, Jessica said to her phone, angling her face for the best lighting tears streaming down her cheeks, though they looked suspiciously practiced. I had no idea he was a criminal. I'm just a victim here, guys. He lied to me just like he lied to his wife. Survivor, now scandal. You're recording this. Marcus gasped, the betrayal hitting him harder than the handcuffs. I have to protect my brand, Mark, she said, coldly snapping the phone down. Don't call me. I'm blocking your number. I don't date felons. She turned on her red stiletto heel and marched out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume that now made Marcus nauseous. James hadn't moved. She stood by the plaintiff's table, watching the disintegration of Marcus's life, with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. She picked up her clutch. Officer, James said softly. The room went quiet. Detective Halloway looked at her with respect. Yes, Ms. Vance. Please ensure he doesn't hit his head when you put him in the car, she said. I don't want any delays in the trial due to medical leave. Marcus stared at her. James, how could you? 10 years. We were married for 10 years. Doesn't that mean anything? James walked over to him. She stopped inches from his face. Up close he could see the gold flecks in her eyes he had stopped looking at years ago. It meant everything to me, Marcus, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, revealing the first crack in her armor. I loved you when we were broke. I loved you when you were stressed. I cooked your meals, I ironed your shirts, and I listened to your dreams. I was waiting for you to become the man my father thought you could be. But you didn't grow. You just rotted. She stepped back, her face hardening into stone. You didn't just cheat on me with a 24-year-old intern. You cheated on the potential of us. You mocked my father's memory. You mocked my simplicity. You wanted a trophy. Well, congratulations, Marcus. You just became the biggest trophy in the state prosecutor's case cabinet. Take him away, she commanded. As they dragged Marcus out the back doors, kicking and screaming about his rights, James turned to Judge Thorne. Thank you, Your Honor. I apologize for the theatrics. Judge Thorne was actually smiling. He closed the file. Ms. Vance, in 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a dismantling quite so thorough. Your father would have been proud. He hated bullies. He hated thieves more, James corrected. She turned to leave the courtroom. She took a deep breath. The Private James, the hurt wife, was locked away in a box in her mind. Now she had to be James Vance, the heir to a logistics empire. She pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse and was immediately blinded. Flash. Flash. Flash! A wall of paparazzi and reporters waited on the courthouse steps. The rain was still pouring, but the press didn't care. News of Arthur Vance's secret daughter and the arrest of a high-flying lawyer had leaked. Microphones were shoved in her face. Ms. Vance, Ms. Vance, is it true you're worth $4 billion? Did you know about the embezzlement the whole time? How do you feel about your husband's affair? James paused at the top of the stairs. Her security team, large men in dark suits who had materialized from nowhere, opened umbrellas over her head. She looked into the camera of a local news station. My husband made his choices, James said, her voice projecting clearly over the rain. He chose greed over loyalty. He chose appearance over substance. Today the law will handle him. As for me, she looked straight down the lens. I have a company to run. Vance Global has been sleeping. It's time to wake it up. She descended the stairs, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. A sleek, black Bentley Mulsanne pulled up to the curb. The driver, an older man with grey hair named Thomas, who had driven her father for 20 years, opened the door. Home, Ms. James? Thomas asked. No, Thomas, she said, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of safety and power. Take me to the tower. Board meeting in 1 hour. As the car pulled away, she saw a police cruiser speeding in the opposite direction, lights flashing, carrying Marcus to the precinct. She didn't look back. The holding cell at the King County Jail smelled of bleach, unwashed bodies and despair. Marcus Sterling sat on a metal bench that was bolted to the floor, shivering. They had taken his belt, his shoelaces, and his tie. His Italian suit was wrinkled and stained with sweat. He wasn't in general population, yet this was just intake, but the company was already terrifying. To his left was a man with a face tattoo, mumbling about government satellites. To his right, a kid who couldn't be older than 19, shaking from withdrawal. Marcus looked at the payphone on the wall. He had been allowed his one phone call. He had called his brother, David. David's response had been brief. Mark, the news is everywhere. They're saying you stole from client accounts. Mum is having a panic attack. I can't get involved. If I post bail, the feds might look at my finances. You're on your own, man. Click. Marcus put his head in his hands. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine he was at Le Caviste. He tried to taste the Pinot Noir, but all he could taste was bile. Hey, suit. The man with the face tattoo grunted. Nice watch. They let you keep that. Marcus instinctively covered his left wrist. They had taken the Rolex at processing. No, it's gone. Shame, the man spat. You look like the type who buys his way out of things. Not this time, huh? Marcus didn't answer. He was replaying the last 10 years in his head. Every time James had asked him to save money, he had laughed. Every time she suggested a quiet night in, he had called her boring. He realized now with a sickening jolt that while he was playing at being rich, she was being wealthy. Wealth wasn't about the car you drove, it was about the power you held in reserve. He had spent his life accumulating debt and appearances. She had spent hers accumulating leverage. He was a pauper in a prince's costume, and she was a queen in rags, and he had treated her like dirt. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was very different, but the tension was just as high. The boardroom of Vance Global Shipping was located on the 55th floor of the Vance Tower. The view was panoramic. You could see the port, the cranes moving containers like Lego bricks, the ships that carried the lifeblood of the global economy. 12 people sat around a table made of reclaimed timber from an old ship's hull. They were mostly men, mostly older, and all very skeptical. They were the board of directors. For years they had answered only to Arthur Vance via encrypted emails and rare phone calls. Now they were looking at a woman they knew only as the mechanic's daughter. James sat at the head of the table. She hadn't changed out of her courtroom suit. She placed her phone on the table face down. "Ladies and gentlemen," James began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a natural authority that silenced the murmurs. "I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that Arthur Vance was insane to leave this company to a housewife. You are thinking I am here to cash out, sell to Amazon or Maersk, and go live on a private island." She stood up and walked to the window looking out at the port. "Is that what you think, Mr. Blackwood?" She turned to face a silver-haired man at the far end. Julian Blackwood. No relation to Marcus's law firm, but a shark in his own right. He was the COO, and he had made no secret of his desire to be CEO. Julian leaned back, crossing his arms. "With all due respect, Miss Vance. Or is it Mrs. Sterling? We have seen the news. Your husband was just arrested for fraud. It calls into question your judgment. If you couldn't see a criminal in your own bed, how can you spot a bad deal in the logistics market?" A few board members nodded. It was a brutal strike. James didn't flinch. "A fair question, Julian, but incorrect. I didn't fail to see it. I watched it. I let it happen." She walked back to the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. "I knew Marcus was stealing 2 years ago. I could have stopped him then. I could have divorced him quietly. But my father taught me that if you cut a weed at the stem, it grows back. You have to pull it out by the root." She leaned her hands on the table, looming over Julian. "I let Marcus build his house of cards. I let him feel safe. I gathered every bank statement, every text message, every falsified ledger. I built a case so watertight that not even God himself could acquit him. I didn't just divorce a husband, Julian. I excised a tumor. That is not poor judgment. That is extreme patience and strategic execution." She looked around the room. The skepticism was fading, replaced by a mixture of fear and respect. "Now," James continued, sitting down, "regarding the rumor that I plan to sell, incorrect. Vance Global is currently losing 4% market share in the Trans-Pacific routes because we are too slow to adopt AI-driven port logistics. We are still relying on legacy contracts." She slid a thick dossier across the table. "This is my proposal for the modernization of the fleet. We are cutting the dividend this quarter to reinvest in automated cranes and blockchain tracking for our high-value clients. It will hurt the stock price for 3 months. It will double our valuation in 3 years." Julian picked up the dossier. He flipped through it. His eyebrows shot up. This is detailed. The financial modeling. I have a master's in applied mathematics from MIT. Julian, James said dryly. I did it online while my husband was out networking with his mistress. I also managed my father's private equity portfolio under the pseudonym AV Holdings. The 15% return you all enjoyed in your pension funds last year, that was me. Silence dropped over the room again. Total stunned silence. You are AV Holdings. A female board member gasped. I am, James said. So do we have a problem with my leadership, or can we get to work? Julian Blackwood looked at the woman he had underestimated. He closed the dossier, placed his hand on it, and looked her in the eye. I move to ratify James Vance as the chairperson and CEO effective immediately, Julian said. Seconded, the woman said. Passed, James said, not even cracking a smile. Now item 2. The forensic audit of my ex-husband's finances revealed something interesting. It seems he was laundering money not just for himself, but for a client named Helix Corp. The air in the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian Blackwood stiffened perceptibly. Helix Corp, Julian asked, his voice tight. That's a shell company. Why does that matter? Because, James said, her eyes locking onto Julian with predatory intensity. The wire transfers to Helix didn't go to an offshore account. They went to a domestic account, an account linked to a subsidiary of this company. James pulled a single sheet of paper from her file. Marcus was a fool, a greedy amateur. But he didn't come up with the escrow scheme on his own. Someone taught him. Someone needed a patsy to move money out of Vance Global without Arthur Vance noticing. She slid the paper toward Julian. Tell me, Julian, why was my husband sending checks to a consultancy firm registered in your wife's maiden name? The twist hung in the air like smoke. The drama wasn't over with Marcus. Marcus was just the pawn. James had just walked into the castle and aimed her cannon at the king. I think, James said softly, we're going to need security in here as well. The silence in the boardroom of Vance Global was different now. Before, it had been the silence of skepticism. Now it was the silence of a bomb squad waiting for the red wire to be cut. Julian Blackwood didn't panic. He didn't sweat. He was a veteran of corporate warfare, a man who had survived 3 mergers and a hostile takeover attempt by a Chinese conglomerate. He simply adjusted his silk tie and leaned back, a look of disappointment on his face, as if James were a child who had spilled grape juice on a white rug. James? Julian sighed, shaking his head. This is quite a performance, really. I didn't know Arthur's daughter had such a flair for fiction. Connecting me to your husband's petty theft, it's a reach, a desperate reach to cement your authority. Is it? James asked. She didn't blink. The paper trail is clear, Julian. Helix Corp invoices for consulting, checks signed by Marcus, funds deposited into an account at First Republic under the name J.B. Trust. I have the bank records. You have hacked records, Julian countered smoothly, inadmissible in court and easily forged. Do you really think the board will believe that I, the COO who built this company's modern infrastructure, would risk my career for a few $1 million laundered through a divorce lawyer? He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked around the table at the other board members. This girl is grieving, Julian announced, his voice oozing fake sympathy. She's lashing out. She's found her husband cheating, she's lost her father, and now she's paranoid. I suggest we recess until Miss Vance has had a mental health evaluation. It was a masterstroke of gaslighting. James saw the hesitation in the eyes of the board members. They were old men set in their ways. They knew Julian. They had played golf with him for years. James was an unknown quantity, a housewife who had suddenly appeared with a dossier. "I move for a vote of no confidence in the chair," Julian said, playing his ace. "Pending a medical review." "Seconded," said a man named Abernathy, a crony of Julian's. James felt a cold spike of adrenaline. If she lost the board now, she would lose control of the company before she even started. She needed more than just numbers. She needed a kill shot. "Sit down, Julian," James said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a subsonic rumble of danger. "I'm leaving," Julian said, turning to the door. "I'll be contacting General Counsel." "If you walk out that door," James said, "I will release the audio recordings." Julian froze. His hand hovered over the door handle. He turned back slowly. "What recordings?" James picked up her phone. She tapped the screen. A voice filled the room. It was tinny, recorded from a distance, but unmistakably Marcus Sterling's voice. And another voice. Julian's. Recording. "She's clueless, Julian. She thinks I'm working late. I moved the latest tranche to Helix yesterday." Marcus. "Good. Make sure you layer the transactions. If Arthur catches wind of the deficit in the Hong Kong accounts, we're both dead. He's sick, but he's not blind." "Julian, don't worry. The old man is dying. Once he's gone, and I divorce James, who's going to look at the books, she'll be too busy crying." Marcus. "Just get it done, Marcus. I need that liquidity to cover the losses in the covert cargo shipment. If the shipment is seized, we need cash to bribe the port authority in Lagos." Julian James stopped the recording. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The covert cargo shipment. Bribery. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was international criminal activity. Julian's face had gone the color of ash. The smugness had evaporated, replaced by the feral look of a trapped animal. That is AI generated." Julian stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "It was recorded on Marcus's Apple Watch," James said. He didn't know it was recording, but the cloud never forgets Julian. And since I pay the family phone plan, I have access to the cloud backups. She looked at the security guard standing by the wall. "Escort Mr. Blackwood to his office to collect his personal effects. Then escort him off the premises. The police are already on their way to pick him up." Julian looked at the board members. No one met his eyes. Abernathy was staring at the table, trying to make himself invisible. "You'll regret this, James," Julian hissed as the guards took his arms. "You think you've won. You have no idea what you've just triggered. You think Marcus was the only leak. You think I'm the only one you just cut the head off a hydra." "Then I'll burn the stumps," James said. Julian was dragged out, shouting profanities. James sat back down. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she hid them under the table. She looked at the remaining board members. "Now," she said, her voice steady, "about that modernization proposal. Shall we vote?" The hands went up instantly. Unanimous. But as the meeting adjourned and the room cleared, James remained in her chair, staring at the port of Seattle below. Julian's threat lingered in her ears. "You have no idea what you've just triggered." Her phone buzzed. It was Detective Halloway. "Ms. Vance, we have Julian Blackwood in custody, but we have a problem." "What problem?" James asked. "He's not talking, but your ex-husband is. Marcus is screaming for a deal. He says Julian has a dead man's switch on your logistics network. He says if Julian doesn't enter a code every 24 hours, something happens. Something bad." James closed her eyes. It never ended. "I'm coming down there," she said. The interrogation room was starkly different from the boardroom. Where the boardroom was wood and glass and light, This room was cinder block and fluorescent hum. Marcus Sterling looked like he had aged 10 years in 24 hours. His designer stubble had grown into a patchy beard. His eyes were red-rimmed and darting nervously. He wore an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. When the door opened and James walked in, Marcus actually sobbed. "James. Oh God, James. Thank you for coming. You have to get me out of here. I can't do this. The guy in the next cell told me he's going to turn my teeth into a necklace. Please, James." James sat down on the metal chair opposite him. She placed her hands on the table. She looked pristine, powerful, and utterly unreachable. "Hello, Marcus." "Baby, look, I'm sorry," Marcus babbled, leaning forward, the chains on his wrists rattling. "I was an idiot. I was weak. Julian, he manipulated me. He told me he'd make me a partner at the firm if I helped him. He said it was a victimless crime. He said your dad had so much money he wouldn't even miss it. My father." James said, her voice, cutting through his panic like a scalpel, missed nothing. He knew Marcus. Marcus froze. "What?" "He knew you were stealing. He told me 3 months before he died." Marcus's jaw dropped. He knew." "Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he have me arrested then?" "Because he wanted to see what I would do," James said. "He wanted to know if I had the strength to handle you myself. He left me the company because I didn't come running to him for help. I gathered the evidence. I built the trap. You didn't just fail as a husband, Marcus. You failed as an opponent." Marcus slumped back in his chair, defeated. The realization that he had been outplayed not just by the legal system, but by the wife he considered simple, was a heavy blow. "Okay," Marcus whispered. "You win. You're the queen. I'm the peasant. I get it. But you need me." "I don't need you, Marcus. I have the recordings. I have the bank records. You're going to prison for 10 to 15 years. Julian will likely get 20. "No." Marcus shook his head frantically. "You don't understand. Julian isn't just a thief. He's involved with some bad people. The cargo he mentioned in the recording, it wasn't just smuggled goods. It was chemical precursors for synthetic drugs. The cartel he works with, they don't accept arrested as an excuse." James felt a chill run down her spine. "Go on." "Julian set up a failsafe," Marcus said, leaning in his voice, dropping to a whisper. "He knew you or your dad might eventually catch on. He embedded a malware worm in the Vance Global Shipping Manifest system. If he doesn't log in to a specific secure server and enter a code by midnight, tonight the worm activates." "What does the worm do?" James asked. "It scrambles the GPS data of every ship in your fleet," Marcus said. "It swaps the manifests. Containers marked toys will be tagged as toxic waste. Ships will be routed to the wrong ports. It will cause global chaos. Your stock will crash to 0 in an hour. Customs agencies all over the world will seize your fleet. Vance Global will be dead by morning." James stared at him. It was a plausible threat. Julian was the COO. He had overseen the IT upgrades. He had the access. "And let me guess," James said dryly. "You know the code." "I don't know the code," Marcus admitted, "but I know where he keeps it. He has a physical ledger, a black notebook. He never let it out of his sight. But last week, when we were panicked about the audit, he hid it. I drove him. I know where he buried it. Buried it, literally, in the foundation of his new vacation home in the San Juan Islands. He poured concrete over a safe box in the wine cellar floor. He thought it was funny. Said he was liquidating his assets into stone." James stood up. "If you're lying to me, Marcus." "I'm not lying," Marcus cried. I just want a deal. I want protective custody. If the cartel finds out I talked, I'm dead. If I go to General Pop, I'm dead. James, please, for the sake of the 10 years we spent together, save my life." James looked at him. She saw the pathetic, selfish man he was, but she also saw the terror in his eyes. "Detective Holloway is listening behind the glass," James said. "If the notebook is there, and if it stops the worm, I will recommend to the DA that you serve your time in a minimum security federal camp. You'll be safe. You'll be bored, but you'll be safe." Marcus collapsed with relief, weeping into his hands. "Thank you. Thank you." James walked to the door. She paused and looked back. "Don't thank me yet, Marcus. You still have to testify against Julian in open court, and you're going to have to look him in the eye when you do it." She stepped out of the interrogation room. Detective Holloway was waiting, looking grim. "You believe him?" Holloway asked. "He's too scared to lie right now," James said. "He's a coward. Cowards tell the truth when they think it will save their skin." "The San Juan Islands." Holloway checked his watch. "That's a 3-hour trip by boat. We don't have time. It's 6:00 p.m. The deadline is midnight." James pulled out her phone. She dialed a number. "Thomas," she said to her driver, "get the helicopter ready. We're going to Friday Harbor, and bring a jackhammer." "Ms. Vance," Holloway warned. "This is police business. We should send a tactical team." "Send them," James said, her eyes flashing. "But I'm going too. That company is my father's legacy. I'm not waiting for a warrant to clear while his ships are hijacked by a computer virus. I'm going to get that book." "It could be dangerous," Holloway said. "If Julian has cartel connections, that house might be watched." "I have security," James said, thinking of the large men who now shadowed her every move. "And frankly, Detective, I'm done being afraid of men who think they can take what is mine." She marched down the hallway, her heels echoing like gunshots. The boring housewife was gone forever. In her place was a woman willing to tear up concrete with her bare hands to protect her empire. The Eurocopter EC-135 cut through the storm like a knife, banking hard over the dark, churning waters of the Puget Sound. Inside, James Vance sat with a headset on her face, illuminated by the green glow of the instrument panel. Beside her, Detective Holloway checked the magazine of his service weapon. 3 minutes to landing. The pilot's voice crackled. "The weather is nasty, Ms. Vance. I can't hold it on the ground for long. Winds are gusting at 40 knots. "Just get us down," James said, her eyes fixed on the black mass of the island approaching below. They touched down on the lawn of Julian Blackwood's Weekend Retreat, a sprawling glass and steel monstrosity that looked more like a villain's lair than a home. The moment the skids hit the grass, James jumped out, ducking under the rotors. The rain stung her face like needles. She ran toward the house, followed by Holloway and 2 of her private security team, Thomas, and a massive ex-Marine named Cole. "Door," James shouted over the wind. Cole didn't bother with a lockpick. He raised a heavy boot and kicked the front door just below the handle. The wood splintered with a crack that rivaled the thunder, and the door swung open. "Basement," James commanded. "Wine cellar." They swept through the house, flashlights cutting through the gloom. They found the stairs behind the kitchen. The air grew colder as they descended. The wine cellar was climate-controlled, lined with thousands of dollars of vintage French reds. "There," James pointed. In the center of the room, the floor was tiled in slate, but in the far corner, under a rack of Chardonnay, the grout looked newer. "That's it," James said. She looked at her watch. 11:15 p.m. "Cole, get the sledgehammer," she ordered. Cole swung the heavy bag off his shoulder and pulled out a sledgehammer and a portable electric jackhammer. He plugged the jackhammer into a wall outlet. Rat-a-tat, tat, tat, The noise was deafening in the enclosed space. Dust plumed into the air. James coughed, covering her mouth with her sleeve, watching the floor being torn apart. "Faster," she urged. "We have 45 minutes before the worm executes." Holloway stood guard at the cellar door, his gun drawn. "I don't like this," he muttered. "It's too quiet upstairs." Suddenly the lights in the cellar died. The jackhammer stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and terrifying. "Power cut," Cole growled in the darkness. "Flashlights," James hissed. Beams of light crisscrossed the room. "It wasn't the storm," Holloway whispered. Someone cut the line. From the top of the stairs, a voice floated down. It was smooth, calm, and accented. "Mr. Blackwood was very specific," the voice said. "No loose ends." James's heart hammered against her ribs. The cartel. Marcus hadn't lied. They were here to scrub the site, and that meant removing the evidence, and anyone who found it. "Police!" Holloway shouted up the stairs. "Come down with your hands up!" Thwip, thwip. 2 suppressed shots hit the doorframe inches from Holloway's head. He scrambled back, diving behind a heavy oak tasting table. "They have silencers!" Holloway yelled. "Take cover!" Glass shattered as bullets began to tear into the wine racks. Red wine exploded outward like blood spraying the room. James ducked behind the concrete island in the center of the room. "Thomas Cole!" she screamed. "Keep digging, I don't care about the shooting, get that box." "With what?" Cole shouted, pinned down. "The power is out, use the sledgehammer." While Holloway and Thomas returned fire up the stairwell, trading shots with the shadow at the top of the stairs, Cole swung the sledgehammer in the dark. Clang. He hit metal. "I found it!" Cole roared. "Get it out!" James crawled across the floor. Glass shards cutting into her knees. Cole reached into the hole and heaved. He pulled out a fireproof lockbox. It was covered in concrete dust. "I need the code to open the box," Cole yelled. "We don't have it!" James shouted. "Shoot the lock! Are you crazy?" Holloway yelled from his position. "You might destroy the book." "Do it," James commanded. Cole placed the muzzle of his handgun against the lock mechanism of the box and pulled the trigger. Bang! The lock twisted, but didn't open. He fired again. Bang! The lid sprang open. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a black moleskin notebook. James snatched it. She didn't wait. She pulled out her satellite phone, the only thing that would have a signal in this storm. She flipped the notebook open. It was filled with handwritten codes, dates, and account numbers. "The date," she muttered, frantically flipping pages. "Today's date. October 14th. She found it. Tau 14. Alpha Zulu 99 reset. She dialed the emergency IT line for Vance Global. Pick up, she prayed. Thwip. A bullet grazed Cole's shoulder. He grunted, but kept firing up the stairs. "It command, this is Jenkins," a nervous voice answered. "This is James Vance," she screamed over the gunfire. "Override code for the manifest system. Are you ready? Ms. Vance, we're seeing massive data corruption starting. The system is locking down. Enter this code immediately. Alpha Zulu 99 reset. Alpha Zulu 99 reset," the tech repeated. "Inputting now." James held her breath. The gunfire seemed to fade into the background. All that mattered was the voice on the phone. "Invalid." The tech panicked. "It says invalid." James looked at the book. She squinted in the flashlight beam. It wasn't a Z. It was a 2. Julian's handwriting was atrocious. "It's a 2 Alpha 2. "Try it again. Inputting. Alpha 2 99 reset." A pause. An eternity. System. System brings up a prompt. Rollback initiated. It's working. The GPS data is correcting. The worm is quarantined. James slumped against the cold concrete, the satellite phone sliding from her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Suddenly the shooting stopped. "Clear," a voice shouted from upstairs. It wasn't the gunman. It was the distinct booming voice of the Sheriff's Department tactical team. Sirens wailed outside, finally cutting through the storm. "We're clear down here," Holloway shouted back. "Suspect neutralized. One suspect in custody. Attempted to flee out the back," the sheriff called down. James looked at the black notebook in her lap. It was dirty wet with wine and rain and battered, but it was the most valuable thing she owned. She stood up, her suit ruined her knees, bleeding, her hair plastered to her face. She looked at Holloway. "Let's go home, detective. I have a company to run." The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Vance Tower, making it gleam like a beacon over Seattle. In the CEO's office, James Vance signed the final document on her desk. It was the acquisition of Blackwood Logistics, Julian's old shell company, which had been seized by the government and auctioned off. She had bought it for pennies on the dollar. She stood up and walked to the window. She wore a white suit today. No more grey cardigans. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, buzzed in. "Ms. Vance, your 10:00 a.m. is here, the reporter from Forbes." "Send her in," James said. As she waited, she glanced at the TV screen on the wall, muted. It was a news report. The headline read, "Sterling sentencing today." The footage showed Marcus Sterling being led out of the courthouse in chains. He looked gaunt, his hair thinning. He wasn't looking at the cameras anymore. He was looking at the ground. He had taken a plea deal, 12 years in federal prison for embezzlement and money laundering. Then the screen cut to a picture of Jessica Vane. The caption read, "Influencer implicated in fraud scandal faces bankruptcy." She was being sued by every brand she had ever worked with. She was currently working at a diner in Idaho trying to stay off the grid. And Julian Blackwood, he was serving life. The cartel connection had ensured he would never see daylight again. James turned off the TV. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel vindictive glee. She felt balanced. The scales had been righted. The reporter walked in. "Ms. Vance, it's an honor. The Iron Lady of Logistics. They're calling you." James smiled. It was a genuine smile. "Please call me James, and I'm just a woman who pays attention to the details." "We wanted to ask," the reporter said, sitting down. "You went from a housewife to a billionaire CEO in the span of a week. You took down a corruption ring. You saved the global shipping lines from a cyber attack. What is your secret? What advice would you give to women who feel underestimated?" James looked at the framed photo of her father, Arthur Vance, on her desk. "My advice is simple," James said softly. "Let them underestimate you. Let them think you are weak. Let them think you are foolish. Silence is not surrender. Silence is where you sharpen your knife." She looked out at the city, at the empire she now ruled with an iron fist and a steady heart. "And when they finally realize who you are," James added, "make sure it's too late for them to run." The reporter typed furiously. That's a powerful quote." "It's not a quote," James said, turning back to her work. "It's a business plan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you never judge a book by its cover, and you certainly never judge a wife by her cardigan. James Vance didn't just get revenge. She got justice. She proved that the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting. It's success. If you enjoyed this story of karma betrayal and absolute boss-level redemption, smash that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you want more stories like this, where the underdogs bite back, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. What would you have done if you were James? Would you have saved the company or let it burn to spite? Marcus. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, Be careful who you step on, because they might be the one holding the ladder. See you next time.